Hello and welcome to episode 216 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we actually do have a roster change in the CDL. We thought that we might have four, and hopefully that isn't the case considering we're filming this on Wednesday. And sometimes that happens where on Thursday everybody decides to make their roster changes, but we do have at least one confirmed change, and we got some other news to talk about, and obviously a ton of great matches. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. First and foremost, want to apologize for any listeners or viewers last week who had to deal with my technical issues and me like skipping and being on delay and whatnot. I honestly don't know what the deal was. The running theory right now is that we were having some internet issues because of the snowstorm coming into the East Coast, but um, if the problems persist today, definitely let us know, and I'll have to try and do something to get that sorted. But hopefully that was a one-time deal, and we're in the clear now. But yeah, like Preston said, we do have a little bit of news to talk about and another set of matches. So ready to jump right in.
The biggest news probably is that the Boston Breach had made a roster change. Telluride Bush actually leaked the change on Monday night. They posted a graphic saying "Thank you, Spart," and it was obviously a picture of Spart from going from Bush to the Boston Breach, and said "Take good care of him." Boston confirmed the news the following day when they announced that Cammy had been released and that Spart had been welcomed into the roster. So Spart getting another chance in the CDL, previously probably most notably with the LA Gorillas, but I think he was also with C9 and maybe someone else. But yeah, he's had a few opportunities before to varying degrees of success. How do you feel about this? Obviously, we talked about the need for a change for Boston. They've had a really rough start to the Major 2 qualifiers. They just lost to the Vancouver Surge last week for the second time this season, and Vancouver only has 3 wins on the year. They've had some good wins, as Boston does, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot, as much hope as there was last season, even though Nasty has broken out as a really, really good player. So how do you feel about Spart coming in for Cammy here?
Yeah, so to tie it in a little bit too, the Breaking Point tweeted a graphic on the 23rd of the longest the pairs of players, or in one case the trio of players who have been teaming together the longest, and it was Insight and Kleenex at 1800 days. Dashi and Draza almost a week away from 1500 days. Simp and Draza just over 800. Abuza and O4 at almost 700. And then Snoopy, Cammy, and Purge was 558. So roughly 560 days now at our time of recording. But obviously with the roster change, um, it wouldn't be higher than 560 any longer because Cammy is no longer teaming with them. So I say that as a way to get that info out there from Breaking Point, but at the same time to illustrate just how long that trio of Snoopy, Cammy, and Purge have been playing together, and it just simply not really working. Sure, like you mentioned, they had a solid run to the third place at Champs last year.
Mm-hmm.
They were able to cause some big upsets, notably at Champs last year with LAT. I think at Major 2 with LAT as well. Against OpTic in the online qualifiers to start last season. Like they had some one-off upsets here and there. But out of that, this team just really never moved the needle, and it always felt like that they needed to make a change, but the organization was in a position where they seemingly weren't willing to make a change, or a high profile change, or anything to that degree. Um, and that brings us to where we are now, where Bush is coming off of winning multiple Challengers Cups, a second place finish at the Challengers LAN, and Spart has been one of the standout players on the Telluride Bush this year in Challengers. So it's not surprising that he gets a shot. I just don't know how much a one for one change to bring Spart in really alters things for this Boston team going forward. Like, I don't know. Like, in theory, he should make them better because of his success with Bush in challengers, and there should probably be some things that he's able uh, to teach the current Boston players and help with their understanding of the game potentially, and how to be most effective in winning, all that yada yada. But um, just overall, I really think that Boston needed to blow it up and try, especially with Nasty's stock seemingly being at its highest point it possibly has ever been in his career. I think they missed out on an opportunity to try and move him. And then if they wanted to bring in Spart and somebody else, I would be okay with that because it wouldn't feel like a multi-person change. Feels like they needed to go that route as opposed for just a one-for-one swap. I do think Cammy was struggling a bit. I even saw like Bance and Methods talking about Cammy needing to be on a sub, and maybe like that's something he's going to do in challengers and try and show that he can be a sub player, which um, obviously Bance teamed with the guy when he was at his best. So if Bance says that Cammy should be on a sub, like I'm gonna take his word for it. But I don't even know if that would have really changed much for Boston either. So I'm gonna be interested to see how this plays out for Boston. Obviously, I'm excited for Spart that he is back in the league, and I do think it's an interesting decision in the sense that Boston seemingly is willing to make changes now, but it's just a one-for-one move, and we'll have to see how this works out. I think it's also slightly interesting that the previous Boston iteration before this season was Snoopy, Wake, Cammy, and Purge, and now Wake is going to Bush with Spart going to Boston. And although it's not the same, but it's kind of funny that you know Bush player goes to Boston, and then a former Boston player goes to Bush.
Yeah, I think what you were saying about, I think they've kind of hit the end of the road here, and I think that's correct. So they came together this roster before EWC in 2024 on the heels of that horrendous season for Boston. They went 6-27 during that CDL season. They were dead last in the league, and then they make a roster. Or they make obviously an overhaul of their roster. The only person that they end up keeping is Snoopy, who we've talked about is definitely like the franchise player that they have built around over the years. So that team came together with Big Wake, and I think the improvement year over year was so astounding. The fact that they went from 6-27 to I believe 16-19 the following year, they actually make champs. They make a run at champs, which is obviously even crazier considering how I would say like outmatched they are in terms of talent, or were in terms of talent. And so that they obviously had an incredible season. I'm looking at their standings, and they finished third in the Major 1 qualifiers, second in the Major 3 qualifiers. That really shows you like how much they came. But this season has been pretty much a disaster. Like if they were able to keep up those results and kind of up and down, sometimes they get a top 4 finish in the qualifiers, and sometimes they're able to win a match that they're not supposed to on land and get those extra CDL points. That would be one thing, but what we've seen so far is they finished 10th in the Major 1 qualifiers. They got first rounded at Major 1, and then they've looked abysmal to start off the Major 2 qualifiers. And we've talked about it before, but like this is definitely the most important set of qualifiers that you can have in the CDL, because you're playing 11 of these matches. You're never going to do this again. You're never going to have like a complete round robin. The other back half of the events are going to be, there's going to be a minor. There's not going to be that many qualifier events. Then you're going to have the major. But right now they're 4-8 on the season. They have a 40% map win percentage. That's third worst in the CDL. They're currently tied for 9th. So if the season ended today, they would not make champs. And, I think if you're any one of those bottom 4 or 5 teams, like nobody can be really safe, right? Like like obviously Nasty is safe in terms of, he's the best player, but he's not safe in the sense of like he can't be traded, he can't be bought out or anything. So it was time for Boston to make a change. It does suck to see that trio of Cammy, Purge, and Snoopy break up, but we still have, at least for the time being, Snoopy and Purge together, and I don't know how long that will be. Like you said, they maybe we're underestimating Spart. He's obviously had some pretty good moments in the CDL, and then that C9 stint was, that for everybody involved, I'm sure they want to forget about it. But I don't know if he's going to be enough for this team, but who knows? Like, I think Neptune has really colored my perception about everything, because Neptune was in not too dissimilar of a situation as Spart, where he had some good moments in the CDO, but he didn't have an overall like overwhelming stint in the league. And then he came back and he was able to help a team that really needed it. I would say that there is far less talent in terms of just the overall scope of the team with this Boston Breach team than there was with that Vancouver Surge team. But I think that he could help them similarly in getting from 9th place to 6th place, which would be a huge accomplishment for a team like Boston.
And I'll play devil's advocate for a second here, because I just thought of this in the moment. Like, obviously, little different circumstances surrounding it with Slasher retiring earlier this year, but this is a very similar conversation to what we were saying when Exceed joined Carolina, and then they rattled off 5-0 record in the online qualifiers, and they had a pretty successful honeymoon phase. It just didn't lead to anything at the major or anything really much since then. So it is possible that Spart comes in and they see some immediate success, but long term, I just I don't know what the ceiling is for this team.
And we don't know because of that. Like, if they had a set ceiling where we felt like, okay, they could get in the top 5, maybe top 6, they could continue to compete for winners bracket spots, they can get the champs if they continue on where they are, then you could say, okay, they're going to keep Nasty and they're going to try to ride it out and just see how much they can get out of this this pairing between Snoopy and Nasty. That there's no reason to believe that that is set in stone at any point. Like, Boston would actually have to come out and say there's absolutely no way that we would let go of Nasty. That's against the complete like code of our organization to throw away a good player, even if it would be beneficial financially. Like, they'd really have to come out and say that for me to believe it. But like you said, the stock is high. Like, the stock might never be higher for Nasty, and that's not a shot at him. It's that a lot of other teams are desperate for AR players.
Exactly.
So the market would say, yeah, let's strike where the iron is hot. We've talked about it before. Like, it's not really too different from Pred in that situation with OpTic, where a team really wanted him, and I think it was Vancouver at the time, maybe it was Seattle, but the Surge, regardless, they said, no, we're going to stick it out because we believe that we can win championships. It obviously did not end up paying them back in the end. He left after the end of the season. They didn't win the championships that they really wanted. But Boston, they're not in a similar situation. They're not in the same situation. They are not competing for championships. They're competing for winners bracket spots. They're trying to get to champs. The bar is a lot lower for them, so they can, I think, reach that a lot easier than the Surge could in trying to win championships with Pred. That being said, I really don't know. Like, I would love to just selfishly, even though I love rooting for Boston, I think it's fun when they win matches that they definitely should not win. At the same point, I do want Nasty to have a chance to compete for championships again, because I imagine going from a year like last year where you're in a bunch of grand finals, you're on a team that certainly was the most consistent in terms of championship contention over the last 3 or 4 months, and then to go to a team that just is kind of bottoming out and is at the end of its road and definitely needs an overhaul. I think that would be very disappointing for a player like him. So if he could land on a team like Toronto that we've talked a lot about, I think that would be very interesting. I think it would help Toronto out a lot. I think Nasty would get some championship bring some championship experience to that team, at least recent championship, grand finals level experience to that team. But I guess it remains to be seen what happens with the Boston Breach and what happens with Toronto. We should probably just mention, did you talk about all of the active streaks for the duos? Because it kind of feeds into what we were talking about. Insight and Kleenex have been together for like 5-6 years now, like 1,800 days as a duo. Obviously, I think that was 2022 they came together, if I'm not mistaken. And they've been together ever since. But we've talked a lot about whether Toronto should replace Insight, and Nasty would be a player to replace him with. And then there's Dashy and Shotzzy at about 1,500 days. I don't see that duo splitting up really anytime soon with the way that things have been going for them. Simp and Draza is interesting. I really don't think about them very much as a duo in terms of like long term, but they're the third longest active teaming players at 800 days. Abuza and 04, the other side of FaZe Vegas, they are on nearly 700 days between both the Surge and FaZe. And then Snoopy and, the graphics at Snoopy, Cammy, and Purge, now it's just Snoopy and Purge at about 560 days. I think it's interesting. I don't really... Do you consider any of these guys duos, like in the sense that I always looked at like Aches and TP were a duo, even though they probably didn't team together continuously for as long as some of these other guys. I mean, I can't even really like, even the OpTic Dynasty, I guess you would consider like Scump and Formal as a duo just because, T2P, but like, I don't know how long continuously they team together. So how do you kind of view these players and how long they've been together?
I think you could consider Kleenex and an Insight as a duo. They've been around together long enough that it makes sense. Dashy and Shotzzy, I mean,
it's a little weird.
It makes sense though, in the sense of how even before this latest like stretch at the end of the year, we were kind of both talking about that they were in a position where they're going to be on OpTic until they decide that they don't want to be anymore. Really,
Mm-hmm.
like it feels like they're now OpTic for life, and especially after these last couple of championships, definitely feels like they're OpTic until they decide to retire. But I mean, Shotzzy and Hook, just as players, regardless of team, makes more sense as a duo to me because they were actually like a sub duo, had the success on Dallas Empire, and that was kind of when Shotzzy came up too. So I don't know how I feel about that, but I mean, I could definitely see the argument for Dashy and Shotzzy as well. Simp and Draza, just no. In my eyes, the Simp duo is always going to be Simp and Abizi, so... even like Simp and Celium, I wouldn't even count them as a duo. It would be the FaZe trio, if anything. So that is what it is. Abuza and 04, I mean, that's okay because they really were like because 04 came in at the end of the season 2 years ago, and that's when that was Abuza's rookie year. When he like started as an SMG and then became the main AR. So they have played together. So I'm okay with that one as well. And then Snoopy, Cammy, Purge. Now Snoopy and Purge. I mean, that's just a duo that's like just happened. Like I wouldn't really count them as a duo. So yeah, I think the view of it is more of like what they do together as opposed to just like two random people who have teamed together and then calling them a duo. That's the difference for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of the times it comes down to how they interact with each other outside of the game too, and whether you can see if they're close or not. Because Ghosty put in the response, he said me and Dylan died because he thought he would be he and Envoy would be in that top 5, and I think the response was that they're like 6th. Yeah, they're tied for 6th with Scrap and Hydra, which I really haven't considered them like together that long, but that
I would if it keeps happening.
And then Metals and Ringcore, which is crazy to think about because Ringcore was a rookie last year, which means that There's not a lot. And then Jodeci's Insight, Kleenex. I mean, again, like Insight and Kleenex seems more like a duo, but the fact that Ghosty and Envoy was like, obviously they went from LAT together to Paris together, but to me that just doesn't compute as a duo. But maybe that's just a blind spot for me. I don't. I mean, I'm not like the police about this stuff, so like
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah,
really
yeah.
matter. But it just
Yeah.
doesn't really connect with me on the same way that obviously the Phase Trio, that if this graphic had been done 6 months ago, Salium, Abizi, and Simp would probably be at the top. They would have to be at the top of the list because
Yeah.
they were the only trio that had been together since the beginning of the CDL. So yeah, it's weird to think about, and we don't have nearly the same kind of connection to duos as we used to, because I think roles are just a little bit different than they used to be. Well, they're a lot different in my opinion. We don't see like the streaming as much with players together. Like it used to be a thing. Obviously, OpTic was very big back in the day, but even if you look at like Impact, like you could look at some of those players and be like that's a duo. And obviously complexity at the same point. And that's why I brought up Aches and TP, because I mean they didn't team together past Ghosts, and that's been 12 years ago now. But um,
Oh.
but they were teammates for a few years there during a stretch of time where or I guess not the CDO, but COD Esports was really blowing up. And I mean, I think they were pretty close friends, even though I've never really
Yeah.
seen them interact with each other since then. I think that's just the nature of life and everything. But it is funny to think about that. That's been so long ago, but I still connect them together, probably for very
Definitely.
good reason. Some challenger stuff. Obviously, you talked about Bush and the fact that they have replaced Spart with Awakening, but before that, they were able to win the North American Challengers Cup, which is their third in 3 months. They beat P7 Torius. I mean, it's pretty cool that these Bush guys are able to bring attention to challengers in a way that really hasn't been brought to the scene in a long time. Probably since it's been named challengers, to be quite honest. Maybe that, like, whatever that was, the OpTic Nation. That wasn't OpTic Nation, but we talked about it before. It was Texas Nation, I think it was. It was Generals,
Yeah, yeah,
OpTic
yeah.
Challengers team. Like there was like a week or two period where it was like, all right, like we can pay attention to challengers. But obviously, congrats to Bush. Do you think, just kind of off topic, do you think they're actually going to be able to finagle their way into the CDL in some shape or form? Obviously, that would somewhat depend on expansion, you would think, but
Yeah.
I mean, they're obvious, like the fact that they were able to talk to Daniel Tai, then and like they seem to have some kind of foothold in social media just based off the Barstool connection that a lot of these other teams don't. Do you foresee them actually being able to get into the CDL at some point?
I do. I think the question is, will they be able to get a spot in the league before the league, like, potentially just like becomes like an open circuit again, sort of deal, as opposed to
Mm.
like sticking to the 12 team format? Because that's obviously the like the easiest path to pro for Bush would be like they just waited out in challengers, the CDL dies, and then they can have a quote unquote pro team in whatever form COD Esports continues after that. Um, Expansion definitely would be an option. I think we talked about it before. Like if there was expansion, it wouldn't happen this way, but like omit Bush, Stallions, and Team War would probably be among the teams to that should be considered based on their investment in challengers over the years during the CDL era. More likely, like a Saudi team would probably swoop in and try to get one of those spots if expansion did happen. But then again, that goes back to our whole conversation we've had about I don't know what the new process looks like, because
Mm-hmm.
technically these other teams have had their buy-ins refunded and all that. So then would a new team have to pay? Would there be a bidding war? And if there is a bidding war, obviously that favors like some of these Saudi teams that we've heard about rumors of potentially having interest. If there isn't a bidding war, then that favors a team like, Stallions for Zuma or Bush, who don't seemingly have like, as strong of financial backing. Um, and I think I joked about it last episode, but like, Dave Portnoy, the owner of Barstool, is pretty close with Robert Kraft, who's the owner of the Kraft Group that owns Oxygen Esports, which operates Boston Breach. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
So we've heard about Boston potentially looking to exit, reportedly, allegedly, over the years. Kraft could be like, "Hey, buddy Dave, you want a COD team? Here you go," and just hand it to the Bush. That would be another easy way for the Bush to get in. How realistic that is remains to be seen. But yeah, I think what the Bush have done in a very short time in Call of Duty Esports has been awesome to see. And I mean, I have friends who are Barstool fans who they played Call of Duty, you know, on and off over the years, but they were not like avid COD esports fans or anything. And then the Bush comes in, and they are just all about the Bush now, and it's pretty hilarious to get texts from some of my college friends asking about like I had one of them ask me what's the deal with this new player the Bush got, and I got to give a little scouting report on Awakening, being like, yeah, kid's a really good Slayer, but everyone thought he was cheating when he first came into the CDL, and uh, turned out he well, I didn't even think about it at the time. There was the cheating allegation just as early as this year
Yeah, that's
that
what I
we
was
haven't
thinking.
really heard anything about, but yeah, no, it's been fun. I think it's been awesome to see what Bush has been able to do in a very short time, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds, because I do think, honestly, when they were baiting a little bit on the timeline with before this Spart news dropped, what they've been doing, they have a video series called the Owners Meeting, which is kind of funny because the running joke is that like Jerry, Sass, and Mook, who are the three Barstool guys, are 0% owners because they started the Telluride Bush, but like they don't actually own any of the team, because technically if they want it to be a Barstool team, then Dave Portnoy would be like the actual owner of it and all that. So it's a funny back and forth gig. But so they've been doing this owners meeting video series between them, and just like talking about, it's basically like a vlog series. And they were like teasing on the timeline real hard, like posting like Jersey Jerry in a depressed face, Mook in a depressed face. And my first thought was that Capsidol got picked up to the CDL, but even I was texting Rule, because Rule is a big Bush fan as well. Um, they like Ronnie Intel and none of the other leakers had tweeted anything about a potential roster change. So
Mm-hmm.
then my head immediately went, damn, like Barstool's going to shut down the Bush, and that would be absolutely catastrophic. Turns out what I ended up, putting two and two together just based on the time they released the owners meeting at 10 p.m. Eastern. Pretty sure Ronnie is in UK. I think, obviously like Crone was in Aussie time, so even though he's not really reporting anymore, but pretty much anybody like Jacob Hale, basically anybody who actually reports or leaks roster moves nowadays is not in American time zone. So a 10 p.m. Eastern announcement would be pretty hard for them to leak before that, unless they were still awake like super late. So I think that's what happened there, was that they just Barstool was able, or Bush was able to get to break the news themselves before any reports came out and whatnot. And I think it made for a pretty interesting development there in terms of how it all played out. But yeah, long term, I am excited to see. Not even for the, obviously I'm excited to see what happens with Bush for the rest of this year, but thinking ahead too, I'm excited to see what the future looks like for Bush and how big they're able to take this thing, because that could be very instrumental for the success of COD esports overall.
Yeah, I obviously I'm not like a huge fan. I mean, I can't say like I'm not a fan of Barstool, but I don't really just like I don't watch a lot of the stuff. But also, but like besides that, the fact that they are enthusiastic about what they're doing and they're bringing attention, like you said, from people that are not Call of Duty esports fans, or maybe they were once upon a time like tangentially connected to COD esports, but now they're kind of being brought in through challengers, which is like by far the most obscure way to get back into competitive COD. I think that says a lot, and that is something that the CDL should try to bring in, because really, like OpTic and FaZe and 100 Thieves, those are the big brands that have some kind of like mainstream connection to society. But even those brands don't have the kind of pull and influence in modern competitive COD. OpTic probably being the top, just based on like what they've been able to do. But if OpTic makes a roster change to their team, will that kind of reach your friend group, like the people that aren't paying attention to competitive COD? Like if Shotzzy got dropped today, like are people going to be actually aware that that happened in a land that we don't really have a connection to? So I don't think so. Like FaZe just made these massive roster changes in the offseason where Celium and Abizi, these guys that have been together for close to 6 years, they left the team to go to other teams. And I didn't see anybody on Twitter talking about that other than the people that are already within our community. So I feel like the fact that Bush is able to get people that are outside of the bubble and bring them in through challengers is huge. So I think that for that reason, they should be looked at as like one of those first few teams for expansion. Like you said, I think Omit and War are teams that have just been around for so long that I think it would be really a disservice to them not to at least consider them. Like I feel like, and we talked about it a few episodes ago, but the CDL should be looking at these teams and saying like, okay, how financially stable are you? Are you able to go and pay your players on a bi-weekly basis? Are you able to put your players up in a facility that they can practice and play matches from? Are you able to provide them with, social media managers for your Twitter accounts, things like that? And if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be in the league. And that's why teams like Carolina, I think Boston has still done a pretty good job, even though I think that their operation has been scaled back to pretty much the bare bones over the past few years. But we saw it with the Paris or Vegas Legion, where they're offering Clayster a chance to come in and play for the team, but also be an executive within the organization, because they basically have nobody working there. And I believe they had some social media manager controversy as well around that time, because they didn't want to pay for one. That kind of leads to what's happening with Carolina. But there are a lot of teams, I think, that I wouldn't say a lot, but there are definitely a few teams in the CDL that have really taken for granted how much of an honor it should be to be one of the 12 pro teams in that sense. And I love what Bush and teams like Omit and War have been able to do, that maybe they should get the bump up hopefully after this year. I would love to see expansion. I think it's good for the league in general. At this point, I don't really see like a downside for it. In all honesty, I don't necessarily think that it'll make the CDL any bigger than it already is, but they're not really sharing a lot of revenue anyway. So what the hell does it matter if there's 16 teams instead of 12 teams? And maybe you can get even more people to look at Bush and in effect the CDL if they're actually in the CDL, rather than just fielding a challengers team that they aren't on they're not on YouTube. Like they're not on like a major Call of Duty Twitch or YouTube channel. So they're basically just doing everything to help themselves and hopefully get into the CDL, I'm sure. Other stuff than that was OpTic just absolutely dumpstering teams in scrims, and then Shotzzy saying that they're not going to schedule. He doesn't want to schedule scrims with C9 anymore, which was Obviously, not a good look for Cloud9 New York, but I think it makes sense if you're OpTic why you would not want to scrim at least really regularly a team that is going to struggle to even win a single match while they're in the CDL. And then the other part of it was somewhat connected just because it's the Texas teams, but Ben J, he wants the teams that are located in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to play LAN matches for their qualifiers. We've seen that a few times, very rarely, honestly, but most notably with the Minnesota Rocker, I know they played against LAG one time, and I feel like they played against Boston, I think, for the next. Yeah, Boston was definitely one of them because there was that cheating or whatever scandal that happened at the LAN, but they played one of their qualifiers a few years ago in Minnesota and then another in
Yeah, I remember
Wisconsin.
that.
So that's probably one of the most notable times that's happened somewhat recently. So what do you think first about OpTic and potentially C9 not being able to scrim one of the best teams? And then probably the more interesting part about like if these Dallas teams actually meet up and decide to play their online matches on LAN.
Yeah, while I'm yapping, you might want to take a peek at the YouTube chat. Shout out Rickus Morty's in the YouTube chat. We're having an interesting conversation comparing Cloud9 to the Browns. So that's something you might have
The
some
Browns
interest in.
spend money, they just don't spend it
I did
very
say that.
efficiently. So
I said they at least paid Deshaun and Miles, so that is one
they're
difference.
kind of like the Riyadh Falcons if they bottom out and they're like the worst team in the league.
But
And
but
selling gets some kind of like legal ramifications out of that. I don't know.
But on the scrimming C9 front, this isn't the first time we've heard this, and literally last year this same thing happened with the all Saudi Falcons roster at the start of the year. People were like, there really isn't a point to scrim these guys because they're just that far behind, and you could make the argument that we could get worse as opposed to getting better, and there's nothing you're going to learn from that scrim. And I just think especially in OpTic's position, like if they say they don't want to scrim Cloud9, what's Cloud9 going to do? There's nothing they can do about that, right? I do think that's a little bit of an OpTic privilege in the sense of I think if other teams tried to, like if FaZe said that, I think there would be some backlash. I think even if LAT said that, I think there would be some backlash. But OpTic says it like people are just laughing it off, thinking like Shotzzy's an idiot and all that stuff. I did say I was talking to Rule about this again yesterday, and I was like, they weren't exactly at the same time last year, but Shotzzy started talking crap last year, uh, either after the major, maybe it was before all the matches started anyway, but either way, Shotzzy started talking that crap early on last year. Then they had their 0-18 spree, so maybe this is like the return of evil Shotzzy for a little bit, and then could that result in another massive losing streak? I personally don't think Merc would let that happen, but um, all jokes aside, yeah, I think there really is absolutely no point for the top teams to scrim Cloud9 until they show that they're improving and getting better. And this again isn't the first time we've heard of something like this happening, just as early as last year. And there's not really a good solution. Like this is kind of just like the position Cloud9 is in right now. Like they decided to go with this budget roster route, and like what are they going to do if these other teams say they don't want to scrim? Like they're obviously going to be mad about it because that's a massive opportunity for their players to get better. But at the end of the day, that's kind of like a side effect to not investing more in your actual roster. So I can see both sides of it. I had a similar viewpoint to it last year when it was, that all Saudi Falcons team, but I did feel that was slightly different in the sense that like this Cloud9 team, like these are North American challengers players, so they at least have some like ability to reach out to other people they played in challengers and stuff and potentially get scrims that way, as opposed to like that Falcons team last year was in North America. Most of them didn't even speak full English at that point, so like it was really hard on a communication standpoint to even try to get other scrims through like the CDL system. So like that kind of was, a difference there. But yeah, end of the day, until Cloud9 sees some improvement, I do not blame OpTic at all if they don't want to scrim them.
I think it's interesting that, I mean, we have brought up that conversation or that comparison before of that original Vegas Falcons team and this C9 roster. I think it's interesting though that OpTic does kind of view them the same way in terms of practice, that it's not worth it, not worth the time and energy to actually play them and practice against them. I think that's interesting. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I mean, OpTic probably need better challenges just in general, because like I think if we just look at the CDL in general, most teams are not close to OpTic because there is a pretty clear divide between that top 3, 4, 5, whatever it is. Like, there is the class of Paris, FaZe, OpTic, LAT when they're at their best. Not always. But those teams are just in general, and I guess Toronto, if they're able to kind of fix some things, but like there's a lot more talent in those 4 or 5 teams than there is on the remaining 7, 8 teams in the league. So the scrims are probably just not nearly as competitive on a regular basis. That being said, Rickett said in the Twitter or in the YouTube chat, he said, this isn't the first time that Shotzzy stopped scrimming teams. He did it when he won the Halo World Championship. And he said if he doesn't feel like he's learning, he's just not going to do it. But in C9's defense, OpTic is slamming everyone in scrims. I think it's fair. Like I don't like for Shotzzy to say it is kind of like whatever. Like I C9 should feel some type of way because it's like very disrespectful to say it in front of your thousands of viewers and then someone clip it and post it on Twitter for more thousands of people to laugh at you and point. But at the same time, that's just the position that C9 is in. They are not a good team. They have no experience in the CDL. I don't think that they have a ton of connections in the CDL either. They have obviously a little bit because there's like Zuma with the Stallions and all that. But like, they've never, like none of these guys have ever played in the CDL. So they don't have any like CDL teammates or like ex-CDL teammates that they can like rely on. Everybody is still in challengers. And I think that just, it hurts you. And this has been a bad season for C9 even before they got there. They were put in a shit situation. And I hope that they're able to pull themselves out of it. But we saw it with the Falcons last year that they couldn't turn it around until they started making roster changes to bring in more talent for their team. And for C9, they are not like the Falcons in the sense that they're not willing to spend the money, allegedly, to improve this roster. Whereas the Falcons, they very clearly, even during last season, they brought in Pred when we thought was like, okay, he's going to go to a contender, and no, he ended up going to the Falcons because the Falcons were reportedly able to offer him more than most other teams were, and then they added Celium to the roster, which was reportedly he's the highest paid player in the CDL. So C9 is just not in that, and so them getting slammed in scrims, there's not very much hope. There's not nearly as much hope as there would be for the Falcons in that similar situation. And also the Falcons, that was by their own design. Like it wasn't like, I don't feel like anybody was like, this is going to be a competitive team or whatever. Like they just wanted to put an all Saudi team on the map, and that's what they did. They very quickly learned that wasn't going to work and that they had to change course, or I don't know, like you just lose a lot of respect around the league if you continue to put out non-competitive rosters, as we saw with the Paris Legion. They continued to put out teams that just were not up to snuff. Maybe I think that first year is probably not fair. Like the first season when they had like Luca and the Aussie players and everybody, I think that team, while not like a championship contending team, was not like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like this makes no sense why these guys are even in the CDL. But I think after that, they started just picking up guys that really probably would have been better off being a top challengers player than going to the Legion. And unfortunately, that's kind of the position that C9 is in, because we just saw a bunch of, or we heard reports that a few Challengers players literally turned down Cloud9's offer when they came to them, and I can't really blame them too much for doing that. So, and Ben was talking about how he wanted encouraged to turn down C9's offer and stay in Challengers, which, other than this situation, when do you hear about that? When do you hear that
Yeah.
Challengers players rather make no salary than play for a whatever it is, $25,000 a year, and play in the CDL? So, yeah, it's a weird situation for C9, but they have to get better. Like, that's the only way out of this. And I think that at least one or a few of these players will be back in the CDL at some point, but they're just in a position like where they really can't win, even in the server or out of the server.
And that's, I said this at the time when we first discussed the Cloud9 roster and everything going on around it. I don't remember exactly how I worded it, but I know it was something along the lines of like, I don't ever want to advocate for people not playing as a team, because that, like, the individualistic mindset in a team esport or a team sport is just not something I usually agree with. But given the circumstances of this Cloud9 team, the position they're in, the reported salary, and all that, I do not blame any of these C9 players if they want to do what they think is best for them and try to just play for themselves, play individually, and showcase their ability, because at the end of the day, they're like, that's how they're potentially going to set themselves up for future success. And it feels really shitty for me to say that, because again, I just don't believe in that mindset, and I don't believe in like the whole not playing for the team yada yada. But I do think this is a rare circumstance where, like, if Encourage is just like, yeah, I'm just going to go out there and try and drop a 1.5 every map. I don't care how much we lose by. I don't care what my teammates are doing. I'm just going to do me. If that was the case, I couldn't blame him, because he's looking out for himself in that instance. And as we've noted before, like, if this doesn't work out as a team, all these guys are just back in Challengers, and then they're forever like um, looped in with this, like, this is what they're known as the guys who joined Cloud9 on half minimum salaries and barely won matches. So it's a rare circumstance, but I can't blame. There's a lot of stuff you can say about all of this from multiple angles, and I can't disagree with it from, I can't disagree with the teams not wanting to scrim them, and I can't disagree if it comes out that some of these guys are just like, yeah, I'm gonna do me and try and do what's best for me. Like, that is what it is.
I think I really like what Rickus was saying. He said that I think it's a stance that he should take and make public to discourage other teams from doing what C9 is doing. What C9 is doing is bad for all the players and orgs in the CDL. I completely agree with that. Like, I would love to see more CDL players speak up, and I think it puts the player, like the C9 players, in a bad position if other players speak up and not say like we're not scrimming them, but say like this is bullshit that they're even in the CDL. Like, obviously that's really disrespectful, and it'll be like pretty hurtful for those players who are honestly just trying to make it. Like you said, like if these players decide, hey, like I'm gonna try to just drop numbers and make big plays, get some attention on me, get some fans. Hopefully another CDL team is paying attention, and they'll bring me in for next season or later this season. But the players should not be put in that position regardless. It is on C9, and the blame is solely with C9 that they're in that position where we're even having this conversation, that these players should try to prioritize their future rather than the team's success, when we're not even at the halfway point of the season. We're 3 weeks into the major 2 qualifiers, and everybody has the ability to make champs, like literally from the very bottom of the CDL to the top. Like, anybody can make or miss champs at this point in the season, and yet we're talking about it because that's the case. Like, that is the actual situation that we found ourselves in, and that is all of C9's fault. They have skimped on their roster for not one season, but 2 seasons in a row. They just have not put any any effort into marketing and like the things that you would think of with C9 in general. They have not really tried at all, whether it be on or off the game. And that's unacceptable for any organization, but especially a legacy organization that has such a deep history in esports in general, that they have basically given up before they've even tried. And I understand, like, when they came in, they definitely thought that they were going to have a different roster and that things were going to be a lot different, that they were going to have a competitive team right out of the gate. But shit happens to everybody. And the Boston Breach, we've always talked about this, but the Boston Breach came into the CDL months after everybody else had assembled their roster. And what the hell did they do the first season? They made it to champs. So there's literally no excuse here. Like, you're C9. You are literally one of the top 3 organizations in North America, maybe 4, whatever. Like, there are very few esports organizations that have more pull and clout and history in North America than you do. And the fact that you haven't been able to field a competitive Call of Duty League roster since you've been in it means that you have not put the effort in to have one. So I think what Rickus was saying, what they're doing is bad for all the players and orgs in the CDL, not just bad for their players, but bad for everybody in it. It makes everybody look, kind of foolish. And I felt this the same way about Paris, the Paris Legion, because, we talked about it so many times, like the fact that they're not fielding competitive teams, the fact that, realistically, they're probably making, or I guess they're probably not making money, but they were losing less money than everybody else because they just didn't spend any money. I think that's bullshit. Like, if you're going to put any kind of time or money into this, like, you should be willing to lose that time and money. And right now we're seeing with C9 that they're not really willing to put in anything. Rick has said, I feel like C9 always was going to sell Hydra. They made zero effort to bring in players to play with Paco. I mean, I don't know what the exact situation was. It could have been that they never were going to be able to bring in Scrap and that it was always going to end up the way it did because, Hydra just didn't want to play with anybody but Scrap. And I think that's his right. Whether C9 could have enforced it and said, like, well, tough shit, like, we can't get him and you're under contract, so you're going to play under the C9 banner for at least 1 year until your contract is up. They could have done that. We've seen that many times in professional sports that just doesn't work out very well because players have a lot of sway with the public, that a lot more than the teams do. Regardless, though, like, even if I look at that as like, that's a 1 season thing that is contained to that 1 year. After that, everybody resets. Like, the league is on basically a 1 year cycle anyway. Like, there are a few players that are on 2, maybe 3-year deals at one time, but the majority of the league is on a 1 year deal. So everything can change within a year. And so if they didn't do anything this past offseason when we heard that they were not spending money, then to me, that's just like, they need to get the hell out of the CDL. Like, they are not worthy of a spot. I'd rather have Telluride Bush, who, I mean, maybe they'll spend the same amount of money, but they'd actually try with the marketing and trying to bring fans into the league, where C9 just isn't doing that. So, my rant is somewhat over.
Yeah, I will say last year it wasn't the fact that they didn't try to put a team together, because they had Attach. Obviously, Attach was towards the end of his career, but they had Sib and it was Mac. Who was the 4th at the start of the year for them? Attach, Sib, Mac. I mean, that's bad that I can't even
I'll look it up.
remember who the 4th was. But yeah, I mean, they like had that whole online situation where C9 was trying to have the players play from California, and they were seemingly like, if we're going to play from California, we're going to have these server issues, and that's exactly what happened at the start of the year, and that just completely put them on the back foot for the rest of the season, basically. So that showed an immediate like lack of willingness to adapt, because obviously we mentioned it multiple times last year when that whole situation was going on with Cloud9, like I feel like there was no way Attach wasn't like, if we play from California, we're going to be at a disadvantage. Like there's no way he just didn't communicate that with Cloud9. I refuse to believe that. And that most likely just means like that's like the way Cloud9 has that whole family oriented thing. They have their like, I don't think it's an actual, it's like a community where the players live and they work out together, like the League of Legends teams and their other teams that they've had over the years. I don't even know what other teams they have at this point. Um, but that's the way Cloud9 has worked. And I mean, with the Hydra thing, like the reported salary for Perks, who was one of the best League of Legends players of all time from Europe and came over to North America for Cloud9. I believe it was reported he got like a $6 million contract from Cloud9. And then after 1 year, he was just like, "Nah, I want to go back to Europe." And Jack just let him go back to Europe. Like that's Jack's way of operating, has always never been like to hold players hostage or anything like that. He's always done what the players have wanted. And that's one thing other people and other esports like about him and the way Cloud9 have worked. It just hasn't translated to the same, amount of, I can't think of the word I'm trying to say here, but it hasn't translated over to the Call of Duty thing in Cloud9's CDL era, at least.
Yeah, but I don't know who they replaced Perks with, but I would imagine it wasn't like I don't know, the Jimbo 49 who is bronze in solo queue. Like that's effectively what C9 did this offseason, where they signed guys that we said the best case scenario was probably that they start the season off strong because a lot of veteran players, and then they'll probably fizzle out, much like Carolina did last year. Well, that didn't happen. They had really close competitive matches, but they lost most of them, all but one, I believe. And like, you kind of get what you pay for, is it not? Like they when they signed Perks, they obviously had the idea, and obviously different esport and all that, but they had the idea that he's going to bring all of this talent and he's going to transform our roster and he's going to help hopefully lead us to an LCS title, MSI competition, worlds, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they did.
But for the CDL, what ambitions can you say that C9 definitely has in the CDL? Like when you sign a roster, and the player you forgot was Crimp last year. And I can give like some grace to that roster where, okay, like some things were kind of a swing and miss. Like Sib is a good player. That was never in debate, but I don't think they put a necessarily good team around him. Attached, like you said, was literally at the end of his road. Like he retired that season. Kremp is...
I left off Kremp, and Kremp did play pretty well last year, all things considered.
But that and then Mac, I believe, had been out of the seed. Like he had been on a break, and so he was coming back in, which is a risk. I should say, like even though Mac was competitive and like a good player before he left, but ultimately he was coming back off of that. That shows me like, okay, you took some risks. It didn't pay off. They did not take any risk this year. Like literally zero risk has been taken from the moment that, I mean, honestly, since they signed that roster before last season, because they stuck with that roster for most of the year. And at the end of the year, they brought in Capsidal and Spart. And then I think at EWC, I think they brought in Gwen. So that was, I mean, I guess Gwen is the risk, but like in the sense that like you don't know if he's going to stay, but like he was a known commodity at that point. To me, like none of that is risky. Like they took a risk with that original roster. It didn't pay off. And then they've done nothing to kind of get back into the good graces of the CDL and try to be competitive again since then. They signed a roster for, I don't know, 2 nickels and a dime this offseason. And then they were like, 2 nickels and a dime is too expensive. How about if we just got an entire roster for 1 nickel and we drop everybody else? Jack comes out and he tries to play the good guy and says, well, I paid their rent for another month. But like you asked them to take a pay cut, a 50% pay cut. And it's like, you knew that these guys were not going to be a championship level team, and yet you're trying to play it off as the good guy. Like I can't get on board with it. Like this whole operation is just in shambles. It just makes no sense. Like, I don't know how we got here from C9's scrim thing, but like,
Yeah.
I think that kind of shows that, like, and we've had these. I have at least had this rant about C9 before, and that I lumped them into the same group as Carolina, that they don't deserve to be in the CDL. Like, if you're not able to pay people, if you're not able to, at least Carolina was competitive in the Major 1 qualifiers, like at least within the realm of the CDL. Like last season, they were competitive for the first half, 3/4 of the season, and then fell off a cliff. I can understand that. C9, they haven't done really anything to deserve that kind of good grace. They just haven't been very good in the CDL at any point. And that's a really disappointing fact, considering NYSL was a world championship level team and was taking risks. Like, putting Crimsix, Paul X, and Hydra in the same room at any point was a risk, because somebody probably could have been assaulted in that room. And yet they did it, and they got whatever second of that major. They got the champs. They had something to give in the CDL, and unfortunately Cloud9 New York doesn't. And maybe Jack changes that. Maybe this offseason changes that. But I just don't know. Like, if they didn't do anything last year, that doesn't give me a lot of hope that they'll do something this year. At least when LAT did that, they signed all these young players and were like, okay, like, we're going to take a risk on Joe DeCeves after he didn't have like that great of a season with LAG to start. You know, we're going to bring in Ghosty, who, you know, mysteriously got dropped by OpTic. Like, stuff like that, you know, makes sense there, but C9 just hasn't done that. What else do we have? Ghost of
We didn't
Hope.
really talk about the Ben. Okay.
Oh, okay. No, you could talk about the Ben thing. That, because
Yeah.
it is interesting. I don't know if it's really going to happen. It just seems like Ben kind of wish casting, but it should happen. You know, OpTic, I believe, owns the esports arena in
I don't know if they
Arlington.
do anymore.
Okay, maybe they don't. I mean, either way,
I don't.
they could set up things at the OpTic headquarters, or one, or if any of these places have like a headquarters, like, all it would really need is like, bring your monitors, bring your PCs, let's set up the match, and then let's go from there. Like, it shouldn't be too hard. We've done this before, but do you think it'll end up happening?
Yeah, I don't know if it will end up happening. I honestly don't know. Like, I think it makes a ton of sense for the players, and like, you know, especially like we were just talking about Cloud9 last year. Like, if they had the opportunity to play some of these online matches in a LAN setting, I feel like they would want to be all over that, because that would help improve their chances of winning versus playing on a massive ping disparity. But these teams that are already in Texas, I just don't know how much they really care enough to do that.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know. Like, I saw some comments in Ben's tweets and stuff like that. I just don't know how much fans would actually care about them playing in the same room. Like, that was part of the argument, as well as like trying to hype it up and create more content and stuff. At the end of the day, I think the bigger issue is like, a lot of people just don't care about these these league matches, whether they're online or on LAN. And I think that's always been an issue in recent years. And I mean, you could definitely make the argument that there's the potential for these matches to get more hyped up with them playing on the same setup or across from each other, some trash talk and some banter here and there. But I just don't know. Like, I feel like that's something that a very serious fan would care about more than a more casual fan. And those quote unquote serious fans are going to watch the match regardless of whether it's an online game or they're actually playing in the same facility.
I agree to an extent, but we saw with the Kason preseason tournament that, like, those preseason tournaments literally don't matter at all. Like, at least the league matches, there is some points implication here, but even beside that, like, those preseason tournaments, and specifically Kason's, where they were literally right across from each other, like old school COD event.
Yeah.
There were clips that came out of that. I believe it was Dashy talking shit to Ghosty, maybe, or Sib. Those clips came out of that, And I think that's good for the CDL. And we've talked about it before. We have to embrace the trash talk. Gears of War was very ahead of the curve, and they were like, that is our thing. Like, the trash talk is what we're looking for. Obviously it's more corporatized now. It's a lot like more buttoned up in the CDL, but even then, like, they have loosened the reins. Like, I don't know if anybody's getting fined anymore for what they're saying on Twitter or in the games or whatever. But I think that is what, like, even if it doesn't have like a huge impact in terms of viewership, I do think that it helps just create rivalries and create moments that otherwise wouldn't be there, because you have to mic up the room. You have to make sure that people can hear, especially after the games, what is being said between players, especially if they're right across from each other. I think that's how all Call of Duty LAN events should be. I understand they're like, well, the competitive integrity and all that bullshit, but at the end of the day, what we really care about is people screaming across the table at each other, saying your dog shit. We would not have the moments like Killa in the choo choo train. Granted, they weren't facing each other, but they were literally like a foot away from each other at the table. That would not happen if they're in soundproof booths and they're 1,000 feet away from each other. Like, no, like, it's got to be intimate, and especially if you're in like more of a confined space, or if you don't want to make a bunch of space. And OpTic certainly could host these events. The only reason I put it at like the esports arena is because then you could sell some tickets. I don't know if that's like worth it financially for these guys, but at least you can make a little bit of money on the ticket sales. But even then, if you just did it in the OpTic HQ and there's just a bunch of teams, I think that works. I think it would be better than it is. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest point that I can make is like, it would be better than what we get now, where they're in 8 boxes on a screen, and it doesn't even feel like the teams are connected sometimes because we just see them in the boxes. I would like to just see something like we saw with the Kason tournament, and kind of go from there. But I don't have a lot of hope that it will happen either, because it would have already happened, right? Because this isn't like all of these teams had just moved into the Texas area. They've been there for years, and I don't think that there's been one instance of them getting together for actual league matches. They've done it for, I'm sure, preseason or boot camps or whatever before champs, but nothing that I can tell from actual league matches. So I don't think it'll happen. I think it should happen, but what I think should happen never actually happens.
That realistically is like, it's basically the same setup as a boot camp is what you would need, and then it just becomes a question of actually getting that done. I saw like Ghosty in reply to Benjay saying like for gentle mates they only have like 2 people on staff in Texas, and none of them have cars, which is like, that makes sense how that could be an issue for them if they have no way to actually transport the the PCs and the monitors and whatnot to wherever the match is being held and all that. So there's obviously a bunch of things to consider with this. I think it's on paper and in concept, it's an interesting idea, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know. I think it would be cool to see happen. I'm not going to hold my breath either.
Rick just said, I don't know what teams you both root for. Since Clayster is retired, I've been kind of agnostic to the CDL. I definitely, I would just say, like, in general, I root for underdogs. So that's just like my philosophy. So whatever match we're talking about, like, I'm almost certainly, I would rather, it's not even like a rooting interest. It's just like, I would rather see the underdog win because I find it more interesting, but that's just about like in every other sport. I can't really say like I have one team. Like, I kind of troll and say the Boston Breach a lot of times, so I'll probably go with that. But I do have some LAG gear rolling around here somewhere. I have a Minnesota Rocker shirt. I have a Paris Legion hat. So like I've supported like half of the defunct CDL teams right now. So I basically like the Grim Reaper. If I buy your merch, you will die at some point, and that merch will become basically worthless if it wasn't already.
The only CDL jersey I have is a a Pharaoh Florida Mutineers jersey. Um, and then I have a New York Subliners sweatshirt that my sister got me after Cloud9 bought the spot because I like the NYSL logo, and I'm close to New York, so um I don't really have a favorite team either. We both I think that helps us both be a little unbiased, even if we do, pick some of the same teams in our pick'em here and there, but I think it helps for the pod in the sense that we don't actually have a favorite team.
Yeah, I have teams that I don't necessarily like, as I've made it
Yeah.
clear on this show. But I tend to dislike players more quickly than I dislike the teams, because the teams can basically change at any moment. Like every year, you can
Yeah.
get a completely new roster, as we've seen in the CDL. But yeah, I don't really have like any team that I root for in particular. So that's gonna make it hard for you to troll either one of us, I think, with it. Um, I am, yeah, I'm definitely a C9 fan. I love Jack. He should come on the show, and we could have a big old party. Your Ghost of Hope report, did this get you hopeful, or did you not
Uh,
want a standalone zombies game?
no, I do. I was really excited for about like 3 hours. Um, So, long story short, we don't have to spend too much time on this, and we can get into our pick 'em and get out of here. But Ghost of Hope reported that the next COD was allegedly, reportedly, uh, like they were eyeing it to be a launch title for whatever the next Xbox system is going to be. And then there's some delays in that, and that's moved them to potentially consider doing two standalone COD releases, which one would be multiplayer and one would be zombies on its own. And that would be, I mean, literally with Black Ops 7, I have played 6 days plus worth of zombies, and I had probably 10 hours in multiplayer total. Like, if there was a standalone zombies game, I would buy that, and that's all I would play. I would love it. I'd be all about it. Um, COD on Twitter denied Ghost of Hope's report, which has happened multiple times before. Then Ghost of Hope responded to that, basically being like, they got the strategy down to a T where they can just deny anything, and even if it comes true down the road, people will forget that COD denied it. And I thought it was just a pretty funny back and forth. So um yeah, doesn't really impact too much for our Ego Chall podcast fan base or anything like that, but for any other big zombies players or fans, I'm sure you, like me, would have very much enjoyed a standalone zombies game. I mean, in theory, this is you know never gonna happen. We've talked about it before, but like technically, if they can do a standalone zombies game, they could do a standalone competitive COD game. I know, crazy concept, and then just like update that year over year instead of releasing a new title. That would never happen from a competitive standpoint, but you know, if they technically could do it for zombies, they could technically do it for the competitive mode. So, that's one thing I guess that to tie it in for the Ego Chow listeners.
Unless it was like a Warzone type of game, in the sense that it's like free to play and it's pretty much connected to the base Call of Duty game, I don't see why, or I don't see why they would do it necessarily, and I don't see that they would do it unless that was kind of like the introduction to making the Call of Duty titles non-annual. And I just don't see that happening like at all. I mean, we've talked about it before, and there have been really kind of intense rumors before that Call of Duty, at least with like Modern Warfare 2 and Modern Warfare 3, MW3 was supposed to be a DLC. It wasn't even supposed to be a full
Yeah.
game. And then they're like, well, our stupid asses, like, we can charge $70 for something that we were going to charge 30 for. How about we just make it 70? And that's kind of how we ended up with Modern Warfare 3. But we've heard like rumors that there's not going to be an annual release for Call of Duty at some point. I will believe it when I see it. We have heard that Black Ops 7 in particular was not a very widely sold game in terms, like, at least relative to other Call of Duty titles. I'm sure it was the biggest video game in the world in late 2025, but they have a different standard, I'm sure, for the sales of Call of Duty titles. But yeah, so I don't know why they would do that unless it was basically just saying, hey, it's coming. Like, we're not going to make annual Call of Duty titles, because taking zombies out of it, or at least taking a big player base out of it, because if they release a zombie standalone game and you're a solo zombies player, like you're only really playing that, what benefit do you have to really buy the base Call of Duty game at that point? Like, you don't
Yeah.
really have it. And that to me is why they do it. Because they want you to keep buying the base game. They want you to keep buying the $70 version where you can play all of it, even if you only play zombies.
Hmm.
But if they do make a standalone game, it will give us a lot of hope. It will give us some optimism that one day we will get a competitive game. Just call it Call of Duty Legacy, whatever you want to call it, and bring all of the favorite parts about the games of past, and maybe bring in some actual competitive players and longtime Call of Duty fans into the whatever it is, the Treyarch, hopefully not IW, maybe Sledgehammer Studios, and hey, like, how about you play around with this? Maybe there's some things from War to War, so Bink can be real nostalgic about it. Then we bring some Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, maybe not like MW2, MW3, like the latest ones, maybe none of that. But I just feel like that is what could happen if we see a standalone game for sure.
I mean, we're at the point now where we have some of these legacy maps being added to Black Ops 7, and they're not even being utilized at the comp level. So I don't have much hope for that ever happening, or, I'm starting to get less optimistic about even a map like Fringe being played this year. So I guess we'll have to wait and see.
And like I said, it's a sign that they don't plan to release a title annually after MW4. I think a lot of those things are fluid, to be honest. Like, I know they said that they're not going to do like back-to-back same titles or same brands, basically. Like, it's not going to be MW4 and then MW5
Yeah,
anymore. But
yeah.
all of that is fluid. And if they have no other better ideas, which I would say that the last 10 or so years has kind of proven that they don't have many better ideas, then they will kind of just go back to what they know and what they can trust. And that's releasing Black Ops titles, releasing Modern Warfare titles. Sledgehammer is pretty much the only studio that doesn't continually just put out the same type of game year over year, because they did War and Vanguard, which you could say is similar. I would say that they're not as similar as, like, the time periods are certainly similar, but the games themselves are pretty different. And obviously AW was way different than any other. Like, that's the most different a COD game has ever been in the history of Call of Duty. So I like that Sledgehammer has been unique about it, but I'm gonna wait and see what Treyarch and IW do in regards to any annual releases. Next up, how about we talk some matches, right? We are at week 3 of the Major 2 qualifiers. There are 7 weeks, I want to say, 7 weeks.
Seven, I think.
Yeah, so 7 weeks. So we're not even halfway through these qualifiers. Of course, every team is playing every team. It's a complete round robin in these qualifiers. Everybody has 11 matches. But we're starting off Friday, February 27th, starting with Carolina versus Boston. So Spart's Boston Breach debut. Carolina trying to hopefully not lose a very winnable match. I will go with Carolina. I mean, I think it's very understandable for anybody to pick either of these teams, because they've both been very kind of gross and not in a good way, but like in a very bad way over the past few weeks. So, but I'll go with the Royal Ravens.
Yeah, Carolina's got 2 matches this week that were the 2 matches for me that I left blank in our notes until very recently. I really wasn't sure who to pick in either of their matches, and especially this one. I've notoriously picked against Boston many times over the years. I am just out on this Carolina team right now, and I'm gonna go with the mini honeymoon for Boston, and I'll pick Boston for this one. I don't, like you said, I can see it going either way. I'm just not confident in Carolina at this point. I think maybe Spart comes in, gives the Boston camp a little bit of life, and helps them beat another team that's at the bottom of the standings right now.
I think it's funny though because the only match we disagreed on last week was Carolina's match,
Yeah.
and you got that wrong, and you said you wouldn't pick Carolina again. So I guess you
Yep.
were sticking true to your guns, even though it comes
Yep.
at a very inopportune time, I would say, for this match. Next up, we have Falcons versus FaZe. Definitely going to go with FaZe. This would be a much bigger match had Falcons lost at least one of their matches last week, because that would put them at like 1-4 after this. But now that they kind of split those matches, it feels like a little bit better regardless of the result here for the Falcons.
Yeah, I gotta pick FaZe, but this is, FaZe, just to jump the gun a little bit, FaZe has another 2-match week this week, and it's Falcons and Boston. And on paper, for me, that looks like a 2 a week for FaZe, but I've said that the last 2 weeks, and they've went 1-1 in each of those. So um, maybe I'm gonna pick FaZe regardless in both of their matches, but just based on what we've seen recently, I wouldn't be surprised if Falcons somehow pulled this off and FaZe has a 1-1 week.
Next up in the last match on Friday, Genomates versus C9. With the conversation we just had about C9, I think we should both pick C9 New York. I will not be doing that, though. I will go with Paris.
Yeah, give me Gentlemates, and I don't think we got to talk about why.
Nope. Saturday, February 28th. I think a really interesting match, Falcons versus G2. G2 has been up and down. They've had some good performances, mostly against FaZe as of late. But they obviously lost last week as well, I believe, to Toronto. Falcons looked pretty bad week 1, played some lesser competition in week 2, won those matches. This is a good test because I think FaZe is a little too good for them. G2, I think they're around the same area in the CDL at this point. I will go with G2. They've proven it more consistently that they can beat like teams around this caliber, but I could see it going either way.
This is a weird one for me too, because I do think it could go either way. I'm gonna pick G2, but this could be a case where like Falcons comes out hot against FaZe and rides some momentum into a G2 match. It also could be a case where FaZe like stomps Falcons, and then Falcons are demoralized going into G2's match, and G2 stomp them back as well. So I'm taking G2, but I think Falcons, this will be a good week to gauge where Falcons are at, like post Major 1.
Next up, Toronto versus Miami. Interestingly, no Real, obviously, because he's on the bench for Koi at this point. No Miami versus Real here. I will go with the Heretics.
Yep.
Toronto did show a little bit of something with their win last week, but they got to show more. Like, I've just seen so much bad Toronto matches like over the past 2 months that's very hard to just shake that idea that they're just all right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Miami as well. I think it is interesting in the sense of like that extra motivation of the Miami versus Real drama, like not being there, how that impacts Miami, or if it even does. It will be interesting to see. I do think, like I talked about last episode, Kips, like, he showed me a little something in his brief CDL stint to start so far, and I like what I saw out of him and potentially what it could mean long term for Toronto. But just in the short term right now, the Miami team has more reps together. I think if Miami is playing right, they should be a better search and destroy team than Toronto, who likely haven't played as many search and destroy reps with Kips yet. So I'm going to take Miami here.
Next up, Vancouver versus Carolina. This is a horrendous match. If Carolina loses to Boston, it is truly a butt bowl between these two teams. I'm going to go with Carolina.
All right. You're taking Carolina 2-0.
Well, Vancouver, they need to lose 3 matches for me to pick them again. Yep. So, I mean, honestly, like Vancouver's won 3 matches this season, 2 against Boston. Carolina, they've won 6 matches, I think, this season. So I just have a little more faith in the Royal Ravens, even if the most recent results have not been very promising.
You brought it up when we talked about Carolina versus Boston. I said I wasn't gonna pick Carolina, and then I get immediately thrown into this week where they play 2 matches that are very winnable on paper. But man of my word, I'm gonna stick to it. I'm taking Vancouver here. I'm banking on a Lunar's masterclass performance to pull off the upset.
This might, because we've been, I think the last 2 seasons, the pick'em has come down to like champs grand finals. This might be the reason that you don't win this year,
care.
because you did not pick Carolina against the
Don't
Boston
care.
Breach and the Vancouver Surge. So someone should bookmark episode 216 as the reason that Bink lost his pick'em this year, or maybe me. If Carolina loses too, I'm gonna lose my mind. Last match on Saturday. It's kind of surprising that they did not finish with this one, considering OpTic plays in the last match on Sunday. But it's OpTic versus LAT. The HBR Classic, as has been, we're still pending on the trademarks. It's been like 4 years. I don't know what's happening there. But pretty different set of circumstances than the last time they played in the Major 1 qualifiers. Of course, at that time, the talk was all about, is Kenny going to get dropped? What the hell is happening with OpTic? Is what's going on in the CDL, where the 2 teams that I think most people thought would be championship contenders did not really look like it at that time. LAT is now 4-0. OpTic is now 4-0, I believe. They OpTic, like we just talked about, have been dominating scrims. LAT, I said it last episode, and I'll say it again. Their competition to this point in the Major 2 qualifiers has been pretty suspect. Again, no fault of their own, but we really haven't seen Neum and this new LAT roster play against a top team until this point. I think this is going to be a huge test. I'm going to go with OpTic for that reason. That it's just going to be a little bit, the lights are going to be a little too bright. It's going to be too big of a match for this LAT team, which has been very inconsistent even before Neum's arrival.
That's what I'm looking at here. I think this is by far Neum's biggest test on this LAT roster. I think it is very easy to pick OpTic for this matchup. With that being said, I'm going to go with LAT and, hope for a scrap and Hydra masterclass, but I could very easily see a case where OpTic just 3-0 slam this if Merc is in MVP Merc form. I am really excited for this match, all things considered, though, and I definitely am interested to see how Neum will play against arguably the toughest competition he's faced yet in his CDL career.
Yeah, and OpTic, they have those stints where they just kind of go into a bit of a downturn, and it would not surprise me if this is the match that they do it in. It happens from time to time, and I mean, they lost the last time they played was essentially because of that. It wasn't that LAT was especially good, because we saw them at the Major and they had like a pretty blah performance, and OpTic ended up going to the grand finals. It was more so the OpTic just kind of lost their way and then found it once they got to the Major. We'll see if that repeats itself here on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we start off with Toronto versus Paris. Definitely going to go with Paris. Toronto, it's going to be a tough week because they play Miami first. Miami they literally just beat FaZe a few weeks ago, I believe. Or was it FaZe? Yeah, I think it was. Now you have Toronto playing Paris, the best team. I'll go with Paris.
Yeah, gotta go general mates here. I do like, excuse me, sort of how we were just saying with Neum having his biggest test now coming against OpTic. Kips has, conversely been like thrown straight into the fire, like playing LAT. Now he's playing the Major 1 winners and Gentlemates. So I do like that in sense of his like development and seeing like how he stacks up to these quote unquote top teams. But I gotta pick Gentlemates here.
FaZe versus Boston. Certainly gonna go with FaZe.
Yeah, I gotta go with FaZe, but like I said for the FaZe Falcons match, something's telling me FaZe are going to have another 1-1 week. I'm not going to pick them to go 1-1, but I wouldn't be surprised if FaZe somehow loses to either Boston or Falcons, and then on Sunday we're sitting here talking about me going again. I have no idea how this happened. I have no really good explanation or analytical breakdown, but that's what happened.
Miami versus C9, gonna go with the Heretics.
Yeah, got to go Miami. Not picking C9, obviously. I do think we saw Cloud9 win a search and destroy against Falcons. Um, I don't think, just because of how highly I think of Miami search and destroy, I don't think that will be an avenue for success for Cloud9 here. But I will be interested to see how the search and destroy plays out in this matchup, because if Cloud9 fights with Miami in a search here, that will make me think higher of this Cloud9's potential in that mode alone. And I know it's kind of crazy, especially given the rant that we had for like 30 minutes before this, but um, that's not always something we see for any new team, let alone a team of 4 amateur players being like thrown together, that they have immediate success in search and destroy, or they're able to gel quickly in search and destroy. So I think this will be a decent test of their search and destroy ability, but I think Miami should win this 3-0. And yeah.
Last match, Vancouver versus OpTic. Again, not really sure how this ended up being the last match on Sunday. Typically, that's reserved for competitive matches, but I mean, they hit the nail on the head a few times last year where we're like, how is this going to be the last match? And then it turns out to be an absolute banger. That would not be good for the hearts of OpTic fans to go to like a Game 5 round 11 with the Vancouver Surge. So I'll go with OpTic, but hopefully this is a match that is somewhat entertaining.
Got to go with OpTic, but TJ had a little bit of of OpTic's number early last year on that Carolina team. I remember like the Scump watch party was not happy when TJ was dropping like a 1.3 at Major 1 to eliminate OpTic, but that was many moons ago at this point. Oh, excuse me. All jokes aside, though, yeah, OpTic should take care of business here. I will like to see. Wow, I'm losing it. I've been hyping up Lunars a lot, really, since his 1.5 performance at Major 1. I will be interested to see how Lunars plays against a team like OpTic.
And that does it for today's show. Please like, subscribe, follow the podcast feed wherever you're listening and watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can watch us live on YouTube, or you can watch us live on Twitch, where you can follow and subscribe twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. You can also follow and subscribe to Bink on Twitch, twitch.tv/jbink with 2Ks. You can follow us on Twitter at jbink with 2Ks, at Pres Byers, and the podcasters at Ego Chall Podcast. The plan is for the next show to be on Sunday, March 1st, the live show, and then the podcast will be up on Monday morning. That is the plan. We will be back then to talk about all of the matches that happened in week 3. Maybe we'll have some roster changes, more roster changes, I guess, to talk about then as well, because we're doing this at around 3 p.m. on Wednesday. Matches don't start till Friday. We probably might have, if half the league changes, it wouldn't surprise me before Friday, but hopefully that doesn't happen. But either way, we'll be back on Sunday to talk about it. That does it for me. Pink, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys, as always, for all the support. Special shout out to Rickus Morty in the YouTube chat today, being an absolute boss and hanging out and yapping with us back and forth here throughout the whole show. Really appreciate you stopping by, and anybody else who anyone else who has anything to say on the YouTube videos or whatever when you're listening. I mean, pretty clear testament with this episode that we like to go back and forth with the people in chat, and if you leave comments on the videos and stuff, we'll most likely get around to answering those and whatnot. So yeah, appreciate you, Rickus Morty. Appreciate anyone else who was stopping by for the live show, and appreciate everyone who's listened to the shows after they're uploaded and whatnot too. It's been a lot of fun so far this year. So we're getting into the nitty gritty of these qualifiers now, and we got a good groove going with our schedule. So Looking forward to what's to come. Excited to hopefully be back on Sunday once again, breaking down the latest matches, especially that OpTic LAT match. That'll be a good one. And yeah, thank you guys as always. And remember to send the chow.